A powerful senator looked a man in the eyes and said, "I won't pay you anything. Not a single dollar." The man smiled and said, "I'll start tomorrow." What happened next didn't just change one career. It sparked a quiet revolution that reminded everyone in Washington what true power actually looks like. Before this story begins, drop a comment. What city are you watching from right now? And if you believe that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, hit subscribe. Because what you're about to hear will change how you see everything. Senator William Hartford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Georgetown townhouse, watching the Potomac River flow dark and indifferent below. Behind him, his chief of staff, Patricia Chun, shuffled through a stack of resumes with frustration. Each one represented someone credentialed and eager to attach themselves to a powerful man's trajectory. Each one was exactly wrong. "Senator," Patricia said, her voice tight, "we've interviewed 23 candidates. 2 have law degrees from Yale. 1 was a Rhodes Scholar. You've rejected every single one without explanation." William didn't turn. At 63, he was entering the pinnacle of his career, a third term, powerful committees, and whispers of a cabinet position. But something had broken inside him 6 months ago. Every interaction felt like play acting. Every conversation like a script he no longer believed in. His wife had left 3 years ago. Karen wasn't the dramatic type. She'd simply said one morning over coffee, "I don't know who you are anymore, William. I'm not sure you do either." She'd moved to California, and their daughter now only spoke to him through lawyers. "They all want something," William said, his voice flat. "They see this position as a stepping stone, a connection to exploit. I'm tired, Patricia. I'm so goddamn tired of transactional relationships." Patricia set down the resumes. "Then what do you want? A personal assistant who doesn't want career advancement? That person doesn't exist. Not in this city." William turned to face her. Patricia saw power and authority. What she didn't see was the hollow man underneath, the person who'd traded every authentic relationship for political advantage and was now choking on the emptiness. "I want someone who won't pretend," William said. "Someone real." The next morning, a different kind of candidate appeared. Marcus Webb was 41 years old, black, with a stillness that suggested he'd learned to take up as little space as possible. His suit was outdated, his shoes worn at the heels. He sat in the waiting room with his hands folded, not checking his phone, just waiting. Patricia interviewed him first and returned to William's office 15 minutes later, confused. "I don't understand this one," she said, handing William a single sheet of paper. "His resume is minimal. High school diploma. He's worked as a hospital orderly for 18 years. I only agreed to see him because Reverend Johnson from your district personally called and asked me to." William scanned the sparse page. "Why does he want this job?" "That's the strange part," he said. "I don't particularly want it. Reverend Johnson said the senator needs help and thought I might be suited. So I came." Patricia shook her head. "No ambition. When I asked about salary, he said whatever was fair. When I asked about career goals, he said he'd never thought about it that way." Something in William shifted, a small crack in his armor. "Send him in." Marcus Webb entered the office with careful courtesy. He didn't try to dominate the room or match William's power. He simply sat with his hands on his knees. "Mr. Webb," William began, using his senator voice. "Why do you want to work for me?" "I don't, sir," Marcus said simply. The honesty made William actually laugh, a real laugh, not the political chuckle he'd perfected. "Then why are you here?" "Reverend Johnson has known me since I was a boy," Marcus said. "He told me you were looking for help and that he thought I might be suited to assist you. He doesn't ask me for things often. So I came." "This is a demanding position," William said. "Why would you leave a stable job as a hospital orderly for this?" "I wouldn't normally," Marcus said. "The hospital work matters. I help people on difficult days. But Reverend Johnson said you needed someone who wasn't trying to climb over you to reach something higher. Someone who could help without helping themselves." William leaned back, studying this man who spoke as though words weren't strategic tools. "Mr. Webb, I need to be clear. I don't want someone building a political career through me. I want simple, honest help. And in return," he paused, "in return, I won't pay you anything." The silence was profound. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I don't understand, sir," Marcus said finally. "I have enough money," William continued, the words coming fast, like a confession. "But I'm tired of buying people. If you agree to help me, it would be because you chose to, not because I'm compensating you. You could keep your hospital job, work here when your schedule allows. But I won't pay you. Not a cent. Senator. Patricia started from the doorway. William held up his hand. Mr. Webb, I'm not offering a job. I'm asking for help I can't pay for. And I'm asking because I think you might be the only person in this city who would understand why. Marcus stood slowly. Why? Why would you want help you don't pay for? William met his eyes and spoke a truth he hadn't admitted to anyone. Because I need to know if anyone would help me without being paid to. I need to know if I'm worth helping when there's nothing in it for them. I need to know if there's anything real left. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. William felt truly seen for the first time in decades. Not as a senator, but as a person. I'll think about it, sir, Marcus said. And I'll pray on it. 3 days later, Marcus called. Senator Hartford, I've thought about your offer. And I've prayed on it. William's hand tightened on the phone. And I'll help you. Not for pay. Because Reverend Johnson was right. You need someone who isn't trying to gain something from being near you. And because, Marcus paused. Because I think maybe you need to remember that your value isn't in what you can give people. It's in who you are. William felt the armor splitting. Thank you, he said, his voice thick. Thank you, Marcus. When should I start? Tomorrow. If that works with your hospital schedule. It will work, Marcus said and hung up. Patricia looked up at William with a mixture of exasperation and concern. This is going to end badly. You know that, right? Probably, William agreed. But for the first time in years, Patricia, I feel like something might end honestly. And that's worth the risk. The news spread through the office like a virus. Senator Hartford had hired a nobody with no qualifications, and he wasn't even being paid. Theories ranged from blackmail to a mental breakdown. Nobody works for free, Jennifer Park, the communications director, said over coffee. What's his angle? A tell-all book? A tax scheme? Maybe he's just helping, offered Sarah, the intern. Honey, Jennifer sighed. Rule number 1, in D.C., there's always a transaction. But Marcus didn't seem to know the rules. He arrived at 7, worked until 2, then left for his hospital shift. He managed the senator's schedule and correspondence with quiet efficiency, never seeking credit or networking with the powerful. It's unsettling, Patricia told William after 2 weeks. He's too good at this. I can't figure out his game. Maybe his game is not having one, William suggested. Patricia gave him a look of deep concern. That's dangerously naive, sir. The breaking point came 6 weeks later during a meeting with Elizabeth Morgan, a retired teacher trying to secure her veteran husband's benefits. She had been shuffled through bureaucracy for 8 months. Marcus greeted her with genuine care, offering tea and a listening ear that brought her to tears. I've been trying so long, she whispered. Nobody seems to care. Marcus took careful notes. When William entered, Marcus had already compiled a clear action plan. Mrs. Morgan, William began, will follow up. Actually, Senator, Marcus interrupted gently, if you'll excuse me. He stepped out and returned with Daniel Kwan, the legislative aide for Veterans Affairs. Daniel, Mrs. Morgan has been waiting 8 months, Marcus said, his voice immovable. She deserves someone who will actually help, not just promise to. Can you take her case? Actually take it. The room went silent. You didn't challenge staffers in front of constituents. You didn't expose the office's inefficiency. But Marcus wasn't performing. He was making the human being in the room visible. Daniel looked at Marcus, then at the weary woman. Yes, he said, finally meaning it. Give me 3 days, Mrs. Morgan. We'll get this sorted. After she left, Patricia pulled William aside, fuming. Marcus just embarrassed Daniel. It undermines office dynamics. It helped her, Patricia, William countered. When was the last time we actually helped someone instead of just going through the motions? Later, William found Marcus in his tiny makeshift office, eating a sandwich and reading James Baldwin. Marcus, William said, sitting on a creaky metal chair. What you did was risky. Some would call it insubordination. I understand, sir, Marcus said. If you want me to leave, I will. No, William said softly. I'm saying thank you. You did what I hired you for. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped them. That's the job, isn't it? It should be, William admitted. But for us, the job became about looking like we're helping while advancing our own agendas. You're making everyone uncomfortable by revealing how far we've strayed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. My father died waiting for help that never came, Senator. People promised, but nobody followed up. I told myself if I ever had the chance to actually do it, I would. Every time. William felt a twist in his chest. Marcus, why help me for free? Why aren't you angry at the system I run? Because anger doesn't help anybody, Marcus smiled sadly. And because you asked for help you couldn't buy. Most powerful people only want help they can control. You wanted something real. What if I fail you? William asked. What if I've lost my humanity? Then we'll find it again, Marcus said. That's what help is, Senator. Believing in someone's best self when they can't believe in it themselves. In that cramped office, William realized that this unpaid helper was teaching him the one thing DC couldn't. That human connection wasn't a currency. It simply was. And for the first time in decades, William Hartford chose the world he wanted to live in. Over the following months, Marcus's presence began changing the office in ways nobody had anticipated. It wasn't dramatic. There were no confrontations, no grand speeches, no obvious moments of transformation. Instead, small things shifted, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface, until the landscape looked completely different without anyone quite noticing when it had changed. Daniel Kwan, the legislative aide who'd been called out over Mrs. Morgan's case, started staying late to follow up on constituent cases personally. He stopped treating them as numbers to process and started treating them as people to help. When someone asked why he was working so hard on a case that wouldn't benefit him politically, he said, "Because Marcus was right. We're supposed to actually help, not just look like we're helping." Jennifer Park, the cynical communications director who'd been certain Marcus was running some long con, found herself in his makeshift office one afternoon. She'd been handling a crisis. A constituent whose tweets about the senator's healthcare vote had gone viral in a bad way. The standard playbook was clear. Craft a careful response, deflect, pivot to talking points, move on. "What would you do?" she asked Marcus, surprising herself with the question. Marcus looked up from his sandwich. "What does the constituent actually need?" "What do you mean?" "Behind the anger. Behind the viral tweet. What's the actual human need?" Jennifer pulled up the thread. The constituent, a man named Robert Chin, no relation to Patricia, was furious because his sister couldn't afford her insulin and had ended up in the hospital. He'd blamed Senator Hartford for voting against price controls. "He needs his sister to get insulin," Jennifer said slowly. "That's the actual need. Can we help with that?" Marcus asked simply. "We could. I mean, there are programs, assistance funds, but that's not really our department, and it won't fix the bad press." And she stopped, hearing herself. "I'm trying to manage the problem instead of help the person. Happens to all of us," Marcus said without judgment. "We forget that behind every political issue is someone's actual life." Jennifer ended up spending 3 hours that afternoon connecting Robert Chen's sister to assistance programs, finding free clinics, creating a resource list. She also called Robert personally to apologize for the senator's office not doing this immediately, and to say he was right to be angry. The tweet didn't go away, but Robert added a follow-up thanking the office for actual help. The story spread. Hartford's office actually helps angry constituent instead of just managing PR. It was such an unusual approach in modern politics that it became news itself. "You're changing how this office works," Patricia told Marcus one morning. She didn't sound happy about it. "I'm just helping," Marcus said. "Same as you." "No, not the same. I manage. I coordinate. I maintain relationships and handle logistics. You actually give a damn. And it's making the rest of us look bad." Marcus set down the schedule he was reviewing. "Patricia, can I be honest with you? As opposed to all the times you've been lying?" But her tone held more curiosity than sarcasm. "I don't think you look bad. I think you look like someone who's been doing hard work in a broken system for so long that you forgot there might be a different way. That's not your fault. That's what the system does. It turns care into strategy, help into transactions, people into problems to manage. But you were good at this once. You cared once. You can care again." Patricia felt something crack inside her. A defensive wall she'd built so carefully over 20 years in politics that she'd forgotten it was there. "What if I don't remember how?" "Then I'll remind you," Marcus said simply. That's what help is. The most dramatic change came during the senator's re-election campaign. 6 months after Marcus started, the polls looked good. Senator Hartford's numbers were strong, his fundraising solid, his path to victory clear. The campaign manager, Stephen Rhodes, wanted to capitalize on momentum with an aggressive ad campaign highlighting the senator's power and effectiveness. The proposed ad showed Hartford in his office, in committee hearings, shaking hands with other powerful people. The tagline, Senator Hartford, getting things done for 20 years. Marcus watched the rough cut in the screening room with the rest of the staff. When it ended, Stephen looked around expectantly. Thoughts? It's empty, Marcus said quietly. The room went silent. You didn't criticize the campaign manager's vision, especially not as the unpaid weird guy who wasn't technically even part of the campaign. Excuse me, Stephen said, his voice dangerously calm. The ad, Marcus continued, seemingly unaware he'd just stepped on a landmine. It shows the senator's power, but it doesn't show why the power matters. It's all transactions, handshakes, meetings. But where are the people he's helped? Where's Mrs. Morgan? Where's Robert Chen's sister? Where's the actual impact? That's not how political ads work, Stephen said. Voters want to see strength, competence, connections. Voters want to believe they matter, Marcus interrupted gently. That's what I think, anyway. They want to know that if they need help, someone will actually help. Not manage them. Not process them. Help them. Stephen looked at Senator Hartford, expecting backup. But William was staring at Marcus with an expression nobody in that room could quite read. Show me, William said finally. Sir. Stephen looked panicked. Marcus, show me what you mean. Make the ad you're describing. Senator, I'm not a media professional. I don't know how to. You know how to see people, William said. That's more important. Show me. 3 days later, Marcus presented his version. It wasn't slick. The production values were amateur. But it opened with Mrs. Morgan, sitting in her home, talking about how the senator's office had helped her husband get his benefits after 8 months of bureaucratic hell. Then Robert Chen's sister, explaining how the office had connected her to programs that saved her life. Then a dozen other people, real people with real stories, talking about moments when they'd needed help and actually received it. The ad ended with Senator Hartford, not in his power office, but in Marcus's cramped space, listening to a constituent with full attention. The tagline, Senator Hartford, actually helping. It's too real, Stephen said immediately. Too raw. It doesn't project strength or power. It makes him look, I don't know, human. Yes, William said quietly. That's exactly what it does. Run it. Senator, I strongly advise. Run it, Stephen. Exactly as Marcus made it. The ad ran. The political consultants hated it. The opposition mocked it as weak and unsophisticated. But something unexpected happened. It resonated. Deeply. Constituents started sharing it, not because they were paid to or because it went viral through controversy, but because it felt true. It felt like someone actually seeing them, actually caring about their struggles. William's polling numbers went up, but more importantly, something else shifted. People started coming to his town halls not to yell or grandstand, but to talk, to share their stories, to ask for actual help instead of performative sympathy. You've changed this campaign, Patricia told Marcus. You've changed this office. Hell, you've changed the senator. And you won't take a single dollar for any of it. Why? Marcus looked at her with those calm, knowing eyes. Patricia, if I took money for this, it would become a job. It would become something I had to do, something with expectations and evaluations and strategies. This way, it's just help. Pure help. No transactions. No obligations. Just one person choosing to care about another person because that's what people should do. That's not how the world works, Patricia said, but her voice held less certainty than before. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But maybe it should be. And maybe if enough people start choosing that world, it becomes real. The crisis came in March, during what should have been routine budget negotiations. Senator Hartford had always voted with his party on spending bills. That's what you did. That's how the system worked. But this particular budget included cuts to veterans' health care and disability programs. The same programs Marcus had helped Mrs. Morgan navigate. William read the bill in his office. Marcus working quietly at the small desk in the corner that had become his permanent space. The budget was politically safe. Everyone expected him to vote yes. It protected his committee chairmanship, maintained party loyalty, kept his powerful position secure. Voting no would accomplish nothing. The bill would pass anyway, and cost him significant political capital. What do you think? William asked, not looking up from the document. Marcus set down his paperwork. About the bill? About all of it. The cuts to programs that help people like Mrs. Morgan's husband. The political calculus that says I should vote, Yes, even though I know it's wrong. The fact that speaking up would be career suicide but accomplish nothing tangible. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you about my mother? William looked up, surprised by the non-answer that was somehow exactly the right answer. She cleaned houses for 40 years, Marcus continued. Rich people's houses in Georgetown and Chevy Chase. She'd come home exhausted, her knees hurting, her hands raw from chemicals. I asked her once why she didn't find easier work. She said, Marcus, I clean these houses like they're my own. Not because these people appreciate it. Most of them barely notice I'm there. But because I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror. I have to know I did the best work I could, that I didn't cut corners even when nobody was watching. That's not for them. That's for me. He looked at William steadily. She died 3 years ago. At her funeral, 17 people came, people whose houses she'd cleaned. They told me they never properly thanked her while she was alive, but that she'd made their houses feel like homes. That her care was visible in ways they hadn't appreciated until she was gone. She never got recognition, never got paid what she was worth. But she knew who she was, and that mattered more than anything else. William felt tears prick his eyes. You're saying I should vote no, even though it changes nothing and costs me everything. I'm not saying anything about how you should vote, Senator. That's not my place. Marcus returned to his paperwork, but added quietly. I'm just saying that being able to look yourself in the mirror matters, and that sometimes doing what's right is its own reward, even when nobody else notices or appreciates it. That night, William couldn't sleep. He paced his empty Georgetown house, the same house Karen had left 3 years ago, the same house his daughter refused to visit. He thought about his career, his power, his carefully constructed political identity. He thought about Marcus working for free, helping without expectation of reward, caring because caring mattered. He thought about the man he'd become versus the man he'd wanted to be when he first entered politics 40 years ago. Young, idealistic, genuinely believing he could make a difference. When had that man died? When had power become more important than purpose? At 3 a.m., he called Patricia. I'm voting no on the budget. Silence. Then, sir, that's political suicide. You'll lose your chairmanship. The party will primary you. Your career. My career, William interrupted, has been built on compromises that made sense politically but were wrong morally. I'm tired, Patricia. I'm so tired of being powerful and empty. Marcus has been working for me for 8 months without accepting a single dollar. You know why? Because he doesn't need payment to do what's right. He just does it. And I'm supposed to be a leader, but I'm being led by someone with no power and no position because he has something I've lost, integrity. The vote won't change anything, Patricia said, but her voice had shifted from argument to something else. The bill will pass anyway. I know, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. And maybe that matters more than I've been willing to admit. The vote came the following week. Senator Hartford voted no, alone in his party. The bill passed 67 to 33. He lost his committee chairmanship within hours. Party leadership stopped returning his calls. The political obituaries started writing themselves. Hartford's suicide vote ends decades of influence. But something else happened too. Mrs. Morgan sent him a letter. Thank you for seeing us. For remembering that these programs aren't abstractions. They're our lives. You probably didn't change the outcome, but you changed everything by trying. Hundreds of letters followed. Not from donors or power brokers or political allies, but from ordinary people who'd felt invisible for so long that a single no vote felt like someone finally seeing them. Marcus said nothing about the vote. He simply continued his work, showing up every morning, helping without fanfare, being present without demanding recognition. But William noticed something new in his eyes when they talked: respect. Not the respect people showed powerful senators, but the deeper respect reserved for people who'd chosen integrity over advantage. I destroyed my career for nothing, William said one afternoon, after another meeting where former allies had frozen him out. Did you? Marcus asked, not looking up from scheduling constituent meetings. Or did you finally become someone worth being? William laughed, a real laugh, not the political one he'd perfected. You're saying failure is success? I'm saying that knowing who you are matters more than what you are. You were Senator Hartford the powerful, and you were miserable. Now you're Senator Hartford the man who votes his conscience, and you're. Marcus looked up. How do you feel? William thought about it honestly. He'd lost power, lost influence, lost the career trajectory he'd spent decades building. But for the first time in years, he felt like himself. Lighter, he admitted. Cleaner. Like I've been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. Then maybe it wasn't nothing, Marcus said simply. Maybe it was everything. 3 months after the vote that ended Senator Hartford's political influence, something unexpected began to happen. It started small. A young staffer from another office stopped Marcus in the hallway. "You're Marcus Webb, right? The guy who works for Senator Hartford without pay." Marcus nodded, wary. He'd become something of a curiosity in the Capitol. The unpaid helper, the man who'd somehow convinced a powerful senator to commit career suicide over conscience. "I don't understand it," the staffer said. "Why do you do it? What do you get out of it?" Marcus considered the question. "I get to help. That's enough. But you could be paid to help. You could leverage this into a career, connections, opportunities. You're throwing away." "I'm not throwing anything away," Marcus interrupted gently. "I'm living according to what matters to me. Can I ask you something? Why did you become a staffer? What did you think this work would be?" The young man, his name was David Chun, Patricia's nephew, trying to follow in his aunt's footsteps, looked uncomfortable. I guess I thought I'd make a difference. Help people. Change things. And are you?" David's expression crumbled. "Mostly I'm just surviving. Trying to get noticed. Trying to advance. The helping part got lost somewhere." "It's not lost," Marcus said. "It's just buried under fear. Fear that if you don't climb, you'll fall. Fear that if you're not advancing, you're failing." "But David, can I call you David?" The young man nodded. "There's another way to live. You can just help. You can show up every day and do work that matters, not for what it gets you, but for what it does for others. You won't get rich. You won't get powerful. But you'll get to be yourself. And that's worth more than most people realize until they've lost it." David stood in that hallway, wrestling with something. Finally, he said, "Would you teach me? How to do that? How to just help?" "Sure," Marcus said. "Come by Senator Hartford's office tomorrow at lunch. Bring a sandwich. We'll talk." David came, and he brought 3 other young staffers who'd heard about the conversation. They sat in Marcus's cramped office, eating packed lunches, while Marcus talked about his mother who cleaned houses, about his father who died waiting for help that never came, about the choice every person faces, to live transactionally or to live with purpose. "But how do you pay rent?" one of them asked. "How do you survive if you're not getting paid?" "I still work at the hospital," Marcus explained. "Night shifts for days a week. It pays my bills. The work here, this is different. This is the work that feeds something else. My soul, I guess, if that doesn't sound too dramatic." "It sounds crazy," another staffer said, but there was longing in his voice. "It sounds like something from a different era, when people could afford to have principles." "People can always afford principles," Marcus said quietly. "What they can't afford is the cost of living without them. That price is paid in different currency. In emptiness, in compromise, in slow erosion of self until you don't recognize who you've become. I've seen what that does to people. It's more expensive than anything else." Word spread. More staffers came. Then interns. Then, surprisingly, a junior congressman from Vermont who'd heard about these informal lunch gatherings where an unpaid nobody was teaching people how to care again. "Are you starting a movement?" Patricia asked Marcus, half joking, half concerned. "No," Marcus said. "I'm just having lunch with people who are trying to remember why they came here." But it was a movement, whether Marcus acknowledged it or not. Young staffers started treating their work differently, less as resume building, more as actual service. Small acts of genuine help began appearing across the Capitol complex. A wave of authenticity in a place that had forgotten what authenticity looked like. Senator Hartford watched it unfold with something like wonder. He'd lost his power, his influence, his carefully constructed political identity. And in its place, something else had emerged: purpose. His office, once focused on maintaining his position, became focused on actual constituent service. Without the pressure of ambition, his staff worked differently, less strategically, more humanly. "You've changed this place," William told Marcus one afternoon. "Not through power or money or influence. Through example. Through simply being someone worth emulating." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just helping, Senator. Same as anyone could do if they chose to." "But they don't choose to," William said. "That's what makes you remarkable. You chose a harder path, helping without reward, caring without compensation, and you made it look like the only sane choice. You've reminded people of something they'd forgotten. that we're supposed to serve, not use service as a ladder to climb. But the movement Marcus had accidentally started came with consequences. The traditional power brokers in Washington watched nervously as their carefully maintained system of transactional relationships began showing cracks. Young staffers questioning whether ambition should be the only metric of success. Interns asking uncomfortable questions about whether legislative work actually helped anyone. A slow erosion of the cynicism that had kept the machine running smoothly. Senator Richard Mallory, the majority leader who'd stripped William of his committee chairmanship, called an unusual meeting. He wanted to see Marcus Webb, the unpaid agitator who was poisoning young minds with impractical idealism. Marcus arrived at Mallory's ornate office with his usual quiet courtesy. The senator, powerful, connected, at the peak of his influence, studied the man who'd somehow become a threat without seeking to be. "Mr. Webb," Mallory began, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades in the Senate. "Do you know what you're doing? You're teaching young people that work should be done without compensation, that caring is more important than advancing, that principles matter more than power. That's dangerous." "Is it?" Marcus asked simply. "Yes, because it's unsustainable. These young people have student loans, rent, families to support. They can't afford your philosophy. You're filling their heads with ideas that will hurt them in the real world. With respect, Senator, I think they're already hurting. They came here to make a difference, and they're drowning in cynicism and transactional relationships that leave them empty. I'm not teaching them anything dangerous. I'm reminding them of why they came." Mallory leaned back in his expensive leather chair. "I could have you banned from the Capitol complex. You're not an official employee. You have no clearance, no credentials. I could make one phone call, and you'd never step foot in this building again." "You could," Marcus agreed. "Is that what you want to do?" "What I want," Mallory said, his voice dropping the authoritative tone and becoming something more human, more vulnerable, "is to understand why you're doing this. Really, you work for free. You've watched Hartford destroy his career because you encouraged him to vote his conscience. You're teaching young people that the system they've entered is fundamentally broken. Why? What do you get out of being everyone's moral compass?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Senator, can I ask you something? When you first came to Washington, and I know that was a long time ago, what did you think you'd accomplish? What was the dream?" Mallory's expression flickered, surprise, then something like pain. "I was going to change the world. I was going to fight for the working class, represent people who had no voice, be different from all the corrupt politicians I'd seen. I was—" He trailed off. "I was young. What happened? I learned how things work. I learned that principles don't pass legislation. Power does. Relationships do. Compromise does. I learned that to do any good at all, you have to survive, and to survive, you have to play the game." Mallory's voice had taken on a defensive edge. "I've passed important legislation, helped thousands of people, done real good because I understood how to work the system." "Have you?" Marcus asked, not confrontationally, but with genuine curiosity. "Or have you passed legislation that looks like help but mostly benefits those who already have power? Have you helped thousands of people, or have you helped thousands of donors while telling yourself it's the same thing?" "How dare you?" Mallory started, anger flashing. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly. "That wasn't fair. I don't know your heart. I don't know what you've done or why. But I know what I see in the young people who come to my lunch gatherings. They're desperate, Senator. Desperate to believe that this work matters, that they matter, that there's a way to serve without losing themselves. And I think maybe you were once desperate in the same way, before you learned how things work." Mallory stared at him, and for a moment, the powerful Senate Majority Leader looked like what he was. A 74-year-old man who'd won every battle except the one that mattered most, the battle to remain himself. "I can't go back," Mallory said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've made too many compromises, burned too many bridges, done too many things that I can't go back." "I'm not asking you to," Marcus said gently. "I'm just asking if maybe, going forward, you could remember why you came here. Not quit or change everything or blow up your career like Senator Hartford did. Just remember, and maybe make one decision differently. Just one. The next time you're faced with a choice between what's politically smart and what's actually right, choose right. Just once. And see how it feels." "That's naive," Mallory said, but there was no conviction in it. "Maybe. But Senator Hartford chose right, and he lost everything. and he told me last week that he feels more like himself than he has in 30 years. That seems worth something. After Marcus left, Senator Mallory sat alone in his office for a long time. He thought about the young man he'd been, arriving in Washington with a beat-up suitcase and massive dreams. He thought about the compromises, the small ones that seemed reasonable, the medium ones that seemed necessary, the large ones that seemed inevitable. He thought about the moment when political survival became more important than the reasons he'd entered politics. And he thought about Marcus Webb, working for free, helping without reward, caring without compensation, and somehow being more powerful than anyone in the building because he'd kept something everyone else had lost: integrity. The budget vote came around again the following year. A different bill, similar cuts to veteran services. Senator Hartford voted no again, still alone, still ineffective in changing the outcome. But this time, something different happened. Senator Mallory voted no too. It was shocking, the majority leader breaking with his own party's budget. The political analysts called it career suicide, just as they had with Hartford. But then 3 more senators voted no. Then 7. Then 12. The bill still passed, but the margin was closer. And more importantly, something had shifted. Voting conscience wasn't automatic political death anymore. It was becoming possible. Did you talk to them? William asked Mallory afterward, in a rare moment when the 2 men found themselves alone in the Senate dining room. To who? The other senators who voted no. Did you recruit them? Mallory smiled, a real smile, not the political one he'd perfected over 4 decades. They recruited themselves. Apparently, your unpaid assistant has been having lunch with their staffers. And their staffers have been asking uncomfortable questions about whether their bosses remember why they entered public service. It's remarkable what happens when young people start expecting authenticity from their leaders. Marcus didn't set out to change anything, William said. He just kept being himself. Consistently. Without compromise. That's exactly why he changed everything, Mallory replied. He showed people it was possible to care without compensation, to help without reward, to be authentic in a place that had forgotten what authenticity looked like. And once people see it's possible, they can't unsee it. Marcus knew nothing about these conversations. He continued his work, helping Senator Hartford with scheduling and correspondence, having lunch with young staffers who were trying to remember why they'd come to Washington, working his night shifts at the hospital, living a life of simple purpose that baffled everyone who encountered it. Don't you want anything? Patricia asked him one day, frustration breaking through her professional composure. Recognition? A paid position? A book deal about your time here? Something. Marcus looked up from the constituent letter he was drafting. I have what I want, Patricia. I'm helping people. I'm living according to what matters to me. I have enough money to pay my bills and enough purpose to fill my days. What else would I need? But you could have so much more. You've become famous, the man who works for free, the conscience of the capital. You could leverage that into what? Marcus interrupted gently. Into money I don't need, into power I don't want, into a career that would turn this into a job instead of a choice. Patricia, the moment I accept payment for this, it changes. It becomes something I have to do, something with expectations and obligations. Right now, it's something I choose to do. That freedom is worth more than any salary. Patricia stared at him, and William watched something crack in her expression. The same crack that had appeared in him, in Mallory, in all the young staffers who'd attended Marcus's lunches. The crack that let light in, that reminded you who you'd been before the world taught you to be someone else. I used to care, Patricia said quietly. When I first started in politics, I cared so much it hurt. And then caring became a liability, so I learned to manage instead. To strategize, to protect. And I got good at it. So good that I forgot what it felt like to just care. You can remember, Marcus said. It's not gone. It's just buried. But you can choose to dig it up anytime you want. 6 months later, Patricia resigned as chief of staff. She took a position with a nonprofit that helped low-income families navigate government services. A massive pay cut, no political influence, no path to power. Her friends thought she'd lost her mind. Maybe I have, she told William over coffee. But Marcus helped me remember that I didn't come to Washington to manage power. I came to help people. And somewhere along the way, I forgot. So I'm choosing to remember. William watched his office transform around him. New staffers came. Young people who'd heard about Senator Hartford's office, where they actually helped instead of just appearing to help, where authenticity mattered more than ambition. They weren't the most credentialed or connected, but they were the most committed to the actual work of service. His town halls changed too. Instead of staged events with screened questions, they became real conversations. Messy, uncomfortable, honest conversations about what people needed and whether government was helping or just performing help. William stopped trying to control the narrative and started listening to stories. He lost his re-election primary. The party ran a well-funded challenger who promised to be a team player, to wield power effectively, to stop embarrassing the party with conscience votes. William lost by 17 points. On election night, while his victorious opponent gave a speech about pragmatism and effectiveness, William sat in his office with Marcus, Patricia, and a dozen young staffers who'd learned from Marcus's example. "I failed," William said, looking at the election results on his phone. 6 years as a senator, and I'll be remembered for losing. "Will you?" Marcus asked. "Or will you be remembered as the senator who chose conscience over career? The powerful man who learned that help without reward was the only kind that mattered." William looked around the room at the people who'd gathered. Not because they worked for him anymore, most didn't. Not because they needed something from him, he had nothing left to give. But because they'd become something rare in Washington, actual friends. People connected not by transaction, but by shared values. "You never took $1 from me," William said to Marcus. "Never asked for recognition, never leveraged this into advantage. You just helped. And by helping without reward, you taught me something I'd forgotten. That the best parts of life can't be bought or sold. They can only be chosen. So what will you do now?" Patricia asked. "Now that your political career is over?" William thought about it. For the first time in 40 years, he had no position, no power, no platform. He was just William Hartford, not senator, not chairman, not majority leader hopeful. Just a man who'd learned, very late, what actually mattered. "I think," he said slowly, "I'll help. There's a legal aid clinic in my district that needs volunteers. They help people navigate systems that are designed to confuse and discourage them. They don't pay much." "They don't pay anything," Patricia corrected. "It's volunteer work." "Even better," William said, and he meant it. "I'll work there. Help people the way Marcus taught me to help. Not for what it gets me, but because it needs doing. And maybe, after 40 years of doing things for the wrong reasons, I'll finally get to do something right." Marcus smiled, that quiet smile that held more approval than any standing ovation. "That sounds like a good next chapter, Senator." "Not senator anymore," William said. "Just William." "Just William," Marcus agreed. "That's even better." Epilogue, the legacy of help without reward. 5 years later, a documentary filmmaker interviewed Marcus Webb for a film about political reform in Washington. The young director, fresh from film school and full of questions about how one unpaid assistant had accidentally started a movement, found Marcus exactly where he'd always been, working. He was at the hospital now, back full-time after Senator Hartford's term ended. The interview happened in the break room during Marcus's lunch hour, with his familiar packed sandwich and worn paperback beside him. "Did you know you'd change everything?" the filmmaker asked. "When you agreed to help Senator Hartford without pay, did you realize what would happen?" Marcus laughed, a gentle sound without ego. "I didn't change anything. I just made a choice. People saw the choice and realized they could make it too. That's all. But you started a movement. There are dozens of young staffers now who work part-time in politics and part-time in real jobs, refusing to make politics their whole identity. There are senators who cite you as inspiration for conscience votes. You're literally taught in political science classes as an example of ethical leadership." "That's nice," Marcus said, and he seemed to genuinely mean it while also being entirely unmoved by it. "But I'm not a leader. I'm just someone who helped when I could, the way I could. The way anyone can if they choose to. William Hartford says you saved his life. That before meeting you, he was powerful and empty, and you taught him that presence without payment is the only kind that matters." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression soft. William saved himself. "I just reminded him of who he'd been before he forgot. That's what help is, sometimes, not changing people, but helping them remember themselves." He works at a legal aid clinic now. Pro bono. Volunteers 40 hours a week helping people who can't afford lawyers. He says it's the most meaningful work he's ever done. "That sounds like William," Marcus said, smiling. "He's good at that work. He cares now. Really cares, not just performs caring. That matters more than any legislation he passed." The filmmaker leaned forward. But don't you want credit? Recognition? You could have written a book, gone on speaking tours, built a career on what you did. Instead, you're back working as a hospital orderly. Doesn't that feel like waste? Marcus set down his sandwich and looked at the young woman with those calm, knowing eyes. What exactly did I waste? I helped someone remember who they were. I showed young people that authenticity is possible even in places designed to destroy it. I lived according to my values instead of compromising them for advantage. And I did it while making enough money to pay my bills and doing work that helps people on their worst days. That doesn't sound like waste to me. That sounds like a life well lived. But you could have had so much more. More what? Marcus asked simply. More money? I have enough. More power? I don't want it. More recognition? For what? I didn't cure cancer or end war. I just chose to help without expecting reward. That's not heroic. That's just human. Or at least it should be. The filmmaker left frustrated. The documentary needed a hero's narrative, a transformation arc, a clear before and after. What she got instead was a man who'd changed everything by simply being consistent, who'd started a movement by refusing to see his choices as movement starting, who'd taught powerful people about power by having none himself. But in the editing room months later, watching hours of footage, Marcus helping patients, eating his packed lunch, reading his paperback, living a quiet life of deliberate purpose, she began to understand. The power wasn't in what Marcus did. It was in what he refused to do. He refused to commodify care, refused to leverage relationships, refused to trade authenticity for advantage. And in refusing, he'd shown everyone watching that another way was possible. The documentary premiered to modest attention. It won no awards, played in few theaters. But it found its audience, young people entering politics and public service, looking for proof that you could care without being crushed, that integrity wasn't naive, that help without reward was not only possible but necessary. Senator Richard Mallory, now retired, watched it alone in his Georgetown home. When it ended, he called Marcus. They'd stayed in touch over the years, an unlikely friendship between a former power broker and a hospital orderly. I just watched the documentary, Mallory said. Any good? It misses the point, mostly. Tries to make you into some kind of saint. But there's one moment, near the end, where you say that helping without reward isn't heroic, it's just human. That part got it right. That's good, Marcus said. How are you doing, Richard? Better. I volunteer at a soup kitchen now. 3 days a week. It's hard work, harder than the Senate ever was in its way. But it's real. I'm helping people who need help, not people who can benefit me. And I remember now why I entered politics 50 years ago. You gave me that. You and William both. We didn't give you anything, Marcus said gently. We just reminded you it was there all along, waiting for you to choose it again. After they hung up, Marcus returned to his evening routine. Dinner at home, a few hours reading, early to bed before his next hospital shift. His apartment was small, his possessions few. He'd never married, had no children, would leave no empire or fortune when he died. By the world's metrics, he'd accomplished nothing remarkable. But in a legal aid clinic in Virginia, a former senator helped people navigate systems designed to confuse them, remembering daily that presence without payment was the gift that mattered most. And in offices across Washington, young people worked part-time in politics while keeping other jobs, refusing to make ambition their whole identity, choosing purpose over power because they'd learned from Marcus Webb's example that you could. And in break rooms and coffee shops and quiet corners, people helped each other without expectation of return, offering time and care and attention not because they'd be compensated, but because someone they'd never met had shown them it was possible. Marcus never knew the full extent of his impact. That was exactly how he would have wanted it, because help measured by impact becomes strategic. Help done without counting the cost, without tracking the results, without demanding recognition. That's help that's actually pure. He'd told Senator Hartford once, I won't take pay because I need this to remain a choice. The moment I'm compensated, it becomes an obligation. An obligation changes everything. He'd been right. By refusing payment, he'd kept the help pure. And by keeping it pure, he'd shown everyone watching that the most valuable things in life, care, presence, authenticity, purpose, couldn't be bought or sold. They could only be chosen, again and again, in small moments that accumulated into a life. That was Marcus Webb's legacy. Not a movement or a philosophy or a political reform, but a simple, radical reminder that help without reward is not only possible, it's the only kind that truly transforms. The helper and the help both. Because when you help someone expecting nothing in return, you prove that they have inherent value beyond what they can do for you. And when you receive help that demands no payment, you remember that you matter simply because you exist. That's the gift Marcus gave to everyone he helped. The reminder that their worth wasn't transactional, that they were valuable not for what they could provide, but for who they were. And in a world that had forgotten how to see people as anything other than opportunities or obstacles, that reminder was worth more than any amount of money could ever buy. Years later, they found something carved into the desk in Marcus Webb's cramped office in the Capitol. The office he'd occupied for 3 years while helping Senator Hartford remember his humanity. The cleaning crew discovered it when they were renovating the space. 7 words, carved small and careful where nobody would see them unless they were looking. Help freely given is help that frees. Nobody knew who carved them, whether Marcus himself or Senator Hartford, or one of the young staffers who'd learned in that room that another way was possible. But the words remained, invisible to most, speaking their quiet truth to anyone who cared to listen. That the most powerful thing you can do is help without demanding payment, care without requiring return, give without counting the cost. Because that kind of help doesn't just change circumstances. It changes souls. And in the end, that's the only kind of change that lasts.